Thank you, Ruben. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Ooh, I'm getting a bit of a feedback. Yeah. Or I could step right here. How about right here? Oh, this is good. We can do this. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Oh, on this cold but sunny morning, it's wonderful to come together and be warmed by your fellowship and community. Here in this place, in gratitude for the privilege of living and gathering on the traditional territory of the past and present Native peoples of the Seven Councils Fire, Ho-Chunk, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Menominee, Peoria, and Miami nations. To do our work of living fully into our values, we are conscious of the history that has been erased and are beholden to learn that history and do the work of reconciliation and reparation. We are committed to being a welcoming congregation to gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, and queer plus peoples, and we know we have much work to do to live into that promise to you, and to continue to call out and address with each other and in the larger world the homophobia, violence, and injustice that continues to harm you and all of us who love you and who are not separate from you. And as an anti-racist faith community, we acknowledge that racism throughout our society leads to the violent deaths and oppression of Jews, Black, and Indigenous people, and other people of color. May we commit again and again to do the hard work of dismantling white supremacy culture in our hearts, in our community, and in our world. Our community of UUCW expands beyond these walls to those of you who are joining us virtually, wherever you are, right now, whatever your age and color and gender, your pronouns, the abilities and disabilities you hold, however you define family, whomever you love, and with all the many cultures that move in your history and in your being, whatever your sacraments and chosen beliefs, you are welcome here. We unite in UU principles, called to work for justice, in covenant and in the spirit of love. I am not Kathy White, who is listed in the order of service. She is feeling poorly today, and so she asked me to sub in for her. And Kathy, if you're online, I hope you get well soon. I am Lynn Capitan. My pronouns are she and her, and I joyfully serve on your board of trustees with Kathy. I've also been on the stewardship team for many years, and through them I have learned how deeply UUCW is loved by you as a community of spiritual seekers who are here on this day, looking forward to contemplating with our guest in the pulpit, Reverend Mark Richards, the relationship between love and fear in the context of polarizing politics. I feel you traveling alongside me in a world of difficulty, refusing to let love sleep. Now, to help everyone get oriented, let me just share a few housekeeping things. If you're new to UUCW, a warm welcome to you. You're invited to fill out the welcome side of the yellow form that you received when you came into the sanctuary, and to visit the newcomers table in the community room after the service, where you can ask questions and pick up information. And if you're online and you want to connect, please email us at visitor@uucw.org. We are a multi-generational community with ways for all ages to participate. Our nursery opens each week at 9:45 a.m. Our religious education classes begin after the story for all ages in the service. And our youth group meets at 11:30. I understand why, having been a parent of teenagers. Every Sunday, and always, all ages are welcome here in the sanctuary, and so we have a worship exploration table over there. For those of you like me, or you guys over there, who can listen better when our hands are busy. And finally, let me call attention to the announcements page in your order of service, which you can take home and refer to throughout the week. And I'll just highlight a few. There's a lot on the page, and don't forget to look at the back side. They go on and on. There's so much going on, so take a look. But number one, I'd like to call out breaking bread and sharing our stories. This is part of our building community efforts to help provide more accessible pathways into engagement and getting to know each other more deeply outside of services. And what a better way to show up for each other than through food and conversation in one another's homes. Please sign up. And especially for those of you who are new or who are looking for a way back or a way forward into our community, we would love to see you there. So please sign up. Likewise, this isn't printed on the order of service, but if you happen to miss the Joyful Community Celebration that we had on the evening of February 3rd, there's a video recording of it that you can check out with all the wonderful music and thoughts that were shared that we used to energize ourselves around our great new mission statement. So you can click on the link that was offered in last Thursday's e-newsletter. And then number 3, stick around after today's service for an important conversation with Reverend Julie and the transition team. This is a perfect opportunity to take Reverend Mark's message into action and explore right relationships with each other. And don't worry if you didn't bring a lunch item to share, come anyway. I'm sure there's always plenty, so I'm sure that that'll be fine. And then number 5 and 6. There's a lot of moving parts today in the community room after the service, but please check out the endowment table if you have an idea for a project that you think that should be funded, and the nominating committee, which wants your input into leadership. And if you like the idea of maybe volunteering for the Board of Trustees, but you feel hesitant about the kind of commitment it might entail, please talk to me. I'm happy to tell you all about it. I have found it as a wonderful pathway for spiritual and personal growth and for working alongside other people who love UUCW. It's really been a wonderful journey for me and for everybody who serves on the Board of Trustees. So think about it and feel free to talk about it and ask about it, and don't worry if somebody makes an immediate call and starts pressuring. That's not going to happen. So just ask, and I'm happy to share. And then number 12, a quick and timely plug for number 12, because Dave Cicero is calling people together for an RE planning meeting tonight at 6 p.m. We want your input into how to attract and meet the needs of our families. Okay, so now that we have the business of coming together squared away, let's settle in and center ourselves as we enter into this time of attending to matters of worth.
Good morning again. Oh, that's better. Thank you. My name is Steve Frey. I'm a member of the worship ministry team, and I'm here today with a wonderful guest in our pulpit, the Reverend Mark Richards. Mark came to Wisconsin in 2016 to serve as a hospice chaplain in Door County. What a nice place to be. In 2021, Mark was invited to join the Wisconsin Unitarian Universalist State Action Network Board of Directors. He was chosen to lead the next phase of its development. He was ordained in 2018 by the First Parish of Concord, Massachusetts. Mark believes that UU principles guide us to bring about a world in which each person realizes the unique spirit they are born to be. Welcome, Mark. And for our call to worship this morning, I get to share a wonderful poem by Amanda Gorman called Compass. This year, the size of a sea sick to its stomach. Like a page, we are only legible when open to one another. For what is a book, if not foremost a body, waiting and wanting, yearning to be whole, full of itself? This book is full of ourselves. The past is one passionate déjà vu. One scene already seen. In history's form, we find our own faces, recognizable but unremembered, familiar yet forgotten. Please, do not ask us who we are. The hardest part of grief is giving it a name. The pain pulls us apart like lips about to speak. Without language, nothing can live at all, let alone beyond itself. Lost as we feel, there is no better compass than compassion. We find ourselves not by being the most seen, but the most seeing. We watch a toddler freewheel through warm grass, not fleeing, just running the way rivers do, for it is in their unfettered nature. We smile, our whole face cleared by that single dazzling thing. How could we not be altered? And now we go to the chalice lighting.
We light this flame to ignite the sacred power of justice. We light this flame so that it may be a beacon of hope in moments of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and the unknown. We light this flame and are emboldened by its blaze, knowing our strength as a prophetic and powerful people. It's rooted in the diverse ways we answer the call to love. Now we will stand as you're willing and able, and we will sing hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to
Good morning. I'd like to invite anybody who wants to see the pictures a little bit better that go with today's story. We have some cushions and a blanket over here. If you'd like to come over and have a seat on the floor, you can do that. While they do that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dave Cicero, Director of Lifespan Religious Education here at UUCW. So, our story today. It's actually a story about a young girl who travels to a new country and has to start at a new school. And maybe you've had that experience. Maybe it's been a while since you've had that experience, but I think no matter if you can relate to that direct experience or not, you can think of a time when you've sort of been scared. You've had a fear. This book is called Me and My Fear. It was written by Francesca Sana. And it starts like this. I have always had a secret, a tiny friend called fear. Fear has always looked after me and kept me safe. Together, we've explored new things and stuck by each other. So I think here are some pictures of maybe on the top right here, maybe a fear that maybe is just kind of maybe not very helpful, but sometimes it's helpful to have fear with us. Keeps us from doing things that are way too scary. And that's a good thing. If you're a little older, maybe you've heard of fight or flight. So sometimes fear is a good thing. It convinces us, it motivates us to do what's safe and good. But our narrator says, she keeps growing and growing. I want to go outside and discover my new neighborhood, but fear won't move. Looks like she can't get around fear here. And when I have to go to school, fear doesn't want me to go. For one thing, when the teacher says my name wrong, fear grows angry, even though I know it's just an accident. And at break time, fear keeps me all to herself. I don't understand anyone, and they don't understand me. Sounds like a lonely time at school to me. She says, after school, fear can't wait to go home. And at dinner, fear eats all the food she can. At night in my new room, fear dreams so loudly that I can't even sleep. I feel more and more lonely every day. Fear says it's because no one likes me. So it's kind of a sad story so far, isn't it? This fear is keeping this lovely young lady here from doing some things that might make her feel better. So what happens when someone bases everything they do just based on their fear? It's not very good. It's not very fun, not very happy. So I'm wondering what might convince someone like our character here to change? Let's see how the story continues. What's this? The boy in my class wants to show me something. Soon we begin to draw and paint together. At break time, I want to go outside and play with the boy. Looks like she's having to convince fear to actually make that happen. As we run through the playground, suddenly a dog barks at us through the fence. Ah! The boy screams and hides quickly behind something strange and small. What's he hiding behind over here? And turns out he has a secret fear like me. And I thought I was the only one to have one. Well, fear is getting smaller each day. It's still not easy to understand everything, but I've started to notice that everyone else has a fear too. And sometimes we all play together. The end. I know Reverend Richards is going to be talking a little bit about how maybe love can overcome fear. Maybe the kind of things that happen when fear is too prevalent in our lives, and we don't have love to help overcome that. So I'll be curious to hear some feedback from some of you that'll be with me during the religious ed classes about what kind of fears that you have, and afterwards too. Perhaps we can all think about what kind of fears we have and what's that keeping us from doing, where love might help overcome that. And Finn, it's time. Finn has agreed to light our chalice, our lantern, so could you do that now? And I'm actually going to invite the RE teachers we have today kind of up front and kind of go with, just help Finn lead the children out into outside the sanctuary. Finn, could you hold the lantern now? as the rest of us sing our recessional. We'll all follow Finn and the other RE teachers out to our classes. Good. As you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go, as you go, may joy surround you. As you go, go in peace. Know our love is with you always. As you go, as you go.
This winter, in order to expand upon the meanings ingrained in our new mission statement, you're invited to share letters to the future UUCW. Letters or words which express how you hope our efforts and dreams today impact those who will follow us. Any of you could share your thoughts in this way, either by speaking on a Sunday or by writing something to share in the e-news. Please let Reverend Newland know if you'd like to do that. Today, Scott Kopishke is going to share a letter written by David Gross.
A letter from David Gross. Dear Unitarian Universalist Church West, this is January 2027. I cannot believe that it's been 10 years since I joined. I'm so happy with all the improvements that have been completed since joining UUCW in 2017. That's also when I joined the campus committee and started becoming more involved here. I have a passion for repairing, maintaining, and improving buildings, being a home repair specialist, home inspector that learned of building performance in 2021, and a level 1 certified thermographer. It became evident at the Christmas Eve service of 2022 that we needed to think about how to improve our sanctuary. We as a congregation care about our energy usage and being a green sanctuary, and put together a plan to update the sanctuary's insulation envelope in 2024. Now, for the past 3 years, we have been enjoying the many benefits of a properly sealed attic and ductwork. Besides saving on heating and cooling costs year-round, we now never see large icicles hanging off the south side of the building. When it's a frosty morning, the roof just stays covered with the frost. The air supply from our ductwork isn't leaking into the attic or exterior, but is delivered more efficiently into our sanctuary. All these improvements have allowed us, the congregation, to not need our jackets during service, like on the Christmas Eve service of 2022 when it was minus 10 degrees. How did all this occur? In 2017, I climbed into the attic and found exposed, non-contact, chicken wire-covered can lighting. These little chimneys are what make it so drafty, which was noticed in 2024 as we looked at the area with thermal imaging with a blower door test. Then volunteers did some hard work prepping the area for the pros to complete the air sealing of the attic areas and ductwork present in the space. The added value and airtightness can be enjoyed by everyone for the rest of our building's life. This one-time investment has resulted in savings on heating and cooling costs for the rest of the building's life. The return on investment would be within 10 years, of course, depending on how utility rates change. The human-induced climate change has continued to have large swings in temperature with severe weather, but we no longer worry about those, for we are well prepared in the sanctuary. UUCW has evolved with many changes since its start. I look forward to continuing improving and maintaining our building as much as I am able, with the help of so many others involved in this congregation, Dave Gross.
The time now. Thank you. This is the time in the service when we like to share joys and concerns, good things, hard things, all the different things that happen in our lives. If you'd like to share, please come forward, use the microphone, and we'll light a candle for you. Kathy. And we light one final candle for all those joys and concerns that we keep in our hearts. We hold you in love. Now let's spend a few moments in silence and stillness to hold ourselves and others in love.
Good morning. It is a privilege to stand before you today. It is a blessing to stand before you today. As Steve implied, I had surgery a week ago Thursday. I was actually rolling the dice when I accepted this date because they first scheduled it for March, and then they said, oh, we have an opening. And I said, I'll take the opening, but I won't tell Steve. Anyway, it turned out pretty well. So I am quite blessed, as we all are, with good health care in this country, despite its often archaic and let's not go there. So our reading this morning comes from Jonathan Edwards. If you've ever taken a course in American literature, you know who Jonathan Edwards is. He is a Calvinist minister from colonial New England who wrote the most famous piece of Sinners in the Eyes of an Angry God. That's not where this comes from. This is from a treatise on religious affections. And he writes, "For so hath God contrived and constituted things in his dispensations towards his own people, that when their love decays and the exercises of it fail or become weak, fear should arise. For then they need it to restrain them from sin and to excite them to care for the good of their souls, and so to stir them up to watchfulness and diligence in religion. But God hath so ordered that when love rises and is in vigorous exercise, then fear should vanish and be driven away. For they need it not, having a higher and more excellent principle in exercise, to restrain them from sin and stir them to their duty. There are no other principles which human nature is under the influence of that will ever make men conscientious, but one of these two, or love. If one of these should not prevail as the other decays, God's people, when fallen into dead and carnal frame, would be lamentably exposed indeed. And therefore God has wisely ordained that these two opposite principles of love and fear should rise and fall like the two opposite scales of a balance. When one rises, the other sinks. As light and darkness necessarily and unavoidably succeed each other, if light prevails, so much does darkness cease, and no more. And if light decays, so much does darkness prevail. So it is in the heart of a child of God. If divine love decays and falls asleep, and lust prevails, the light and joy of hope go out, and the dark fear and doubting arises. And if, on the contrary, divine love prevails and comes into lively exercise, this brings the brightness of hope and drives away lust and fear with it. Please rise as you are willing and able and join me in singing hymn number 187. It sounds along the ages.
It sounds along the ages, soul answering to soul. It kindles on the pages of every Bible scroll. The psalmist heard and sang it, from martyr lips it rose, and prophet tongues out rang it, till sleeping nations woke. From Sinai's cliffs it echoed, it breathed from Buddha's tree. It charmed in Athens' market, it hallowed Galilee. The hammer stroke of Luther, the pilgrim's seaside prayer, the oracles of Concord, one holy word declare. It calls and lo, new justice, it speaks and lo, new truth. In ever nobler stature and unexhausted youth, forever unresounding and knowing not of time, our laws but catch the music of its eternal chime.
When love sleeps, fear prevails. This is a slogan I've been developing for the past 30 years. My very first sermon contrasted love and fear, and has been a theme for my ministry ever since. It's said that every minister has only 3 sermons, but I'm a chaplain, so I only need 1. It began, I think, with a line from the Reverend William Sloane Coffin from his book, Credo. It's a line that was used in a sermon I heard in the early years of my UU journey. He writes, "The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is fear." And so this line stayed with me through seminary, where I sought its biblical source. And in the first letter of John, in chapter 4, we find, "God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. That there is no fear in love points to a way in which to remove fear from our lives. It implies we have control over whether we live our lives in fear or love. Now, in my binary thinking, it works for me to think of love as the power that binds us together, and fear as the power that separates us. And then last year, in researching a sermon, I discovered this Jonathan Edwards piece. I found intriguing the idea of that love and fear live in balance within us. Edwards believes that either one or the other is necessary to maintain moral standing. That is, we live moral lives either through the fundamental love we have for each other and for creation, or through a fear of eternal punishment should we fail to live harmoniously with creation. It's kind of an 18th century Calvinist expression of the passage from 1 John. So this thought brought to mind a story about Hosea Ballou. Hosea Ballou was the preeminent voice of Universalism in the early 19th century. Out riding one day with a friend, they were talking about the precepts of Universalism, and his friend says to him, "So you're telling me that if I'm a Universalist, I could knock you off your horse and leave you for dead, and I would still go to heaven?" And Ballou replies, "Sir, if you were a Universalist, you would not even think about knocking me off my horse." The question derives from a fear that heaven can be denied, and the response evolves from an intrinsic love of all creation. When love sleeps, fear prevails. So all of this is prelude to the topic I really want to talk about this morning, which is the relationship between the church and the state, between religion and politics in America, especially today. Leading up to national elections in November, with a glance at state and local elections in April, this year promises to bring campaigns of self-aggrandizement, vitriol, and idolatry, forcing us to decide on existential questions for our communities, for our state, for our nation, and for the world. The effect of American politics on world affairs is already obvious. And much of this is being fueled with religious fervor that from sources whose motives we have to question. Tim Alberta recently published a book called The Kingdom, the Power, and the Glory. And it takes on this religious dimension of today's politics. In his prelude to the book, he tells of his experience at his father's funeral. His father was an evangelical preacher. His name was Richard. He was one who loved the gospel and could just let it preach itself. His son Tim is an acclaimed political writer. He writes for The Atlantic. He wrote for Politico prior to that, and he's contributed to publications like the Wall Street Journal and Vanity Fair. Very respected writer in the field. Tim recounts that standing in the receiving line, talking with the parishioners he had known all of his life, many of them chided him for his writings, invoking ideas from Rush Limbaugh and Donald Trump. In his eulogy later that day, Alberta chastised those who brought politics to his father's funeral, suggesting that they listen again to some of his sermons rather than to a daily dose of Rush Limbaugh. And the response he got from them inspired him to write his book. So the kingdom and the power and the glory goes to describe the rise of evangelical right from the days of Billy Graham and his ministry to provide spiritual guidance to 7 United States presidents, to the work of Billy Graham Jr. and Jerry Falwell Jr., who capitalized the power of people's faith into personal power and wealth. I want to be careful here when talking about evangelicals. Evangelical Christianity embraces a whole swath of American Christianity. Many clear-thinking, right-hearted people describe themselves as evangelical, including all Lutherans, by the way. Not all of them engage in the political exploitation of their faith. 13 years ago, I was sitting in a class in seminary, and I used the word evangelical to describe these radically conservative Christians. The man sitting next to me says, "Not all evangelicals believe that way. I am evangelical." He suggested that we use the word fundamentalist. Today, we might call them Christian nationalists. So, Christian nationalism, that's the term that we on the left use to describe those who decry any faith except the one that they believe in. They propagate a perceived persecution against Christians because not everyone accepts their beliefs about race, gender identity, sexual and reproductive choice. And in recent years, they conflate their faith with their politics. Your faith is validated by your political choices. Your politics are confirmed by your faith expression. It leads to blind choice, public acceptance of faith. In a recent Time report, Samuel L. Perry writes, "In of fanatical partisanship and culture warring, and you understand why white evangelicals will always fall in line." So one example that Alberta offers is the story of Russell Moore. You may have heard of him. Moore had achieved a powerful position in the Southern Baptist Convention. He was chair of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. And from this post, he oversaw the entirety of the SBC's public face. Moore was the grandson of a Southern Baptist minister. He was active throughout his lifetime in his church, rising up to be youth minister. He received all of his degrees up through his doctorate at Southern Baptist Convention universities. He taught the next generation of SBC ministers and weighed in heavily on issues affecting the church. He lived and breathed Southern Baptist Convention culture from the womb. In May of 2021, Moore was relieved of his duties as chair of the ERL Commission. His offenses? He urged open conversations about racial tensions within the Southern Baptist Convention and about sexual abuse within the churches. This was a direct challenge to the entrenched leadership who wanted to keep these topics under the basket. It didn't help that he also denounced Donald Trump. Fiery displays at the annual convention, along with Donald Trump's victory in 2016, stacked the forces against him. And upon his exit, he said, "Free at last." This is just a glimpse of what I believe are much larger forces at play in our global society. Since the end of World War II, we have been edging away from the Euro-dominant colonialism that prevailed before the war. Roe v. Wade decision was a turning point which galvanized opposition to the trend. And though through organized multi-dimensional efforts, it was finally overturned. What the opposition did not anticipate was the widespread support that reproductive rights, racial equality, gender and sexual liberation have gained through the generations. Many churches caught that wave and adjusted to the idea that each person has a right to fulfill the destiny of the soul with which they were born. Those with a more entrenched power structure use their resources to build up the resistance so that they can keep hold of their power. Social mores are coming to a boil, and everyone is afraid they will lose the influence they had to direct the change. Another more recent example is the Super Bowl ad run by the organization known as He Gets Us. The ad shows people in power washing the feet of those who are marginalized, suppressed, at risk. Media response, both social and corporate, was to call out the sponsors as those who support culture war values. The $10 million or $20 million cost of the ad could have been used to feed the hungry, we said, with total disregard to the $23 billion wagered on the Super Bowl. It is a subtle attempt to recruit more people to their repressive theology, we said. The message that those in power should be serving the least among us gets lost in this meta conversation. The purity of the loving message is overpowered by the fear of the messenger. When love sleeps, fear prevails. A common rallying cry of our Christian nationalist siblings is that America must return to the Christian nation it was founded as. Well, let's look at that for a moment. Our Constitution prohibits the establishment of a state religion, as well as the regulation of religious belief and any kind of religious qualification to hold public office. Some challenge any appearance of religion in government function. Others say that public acts by citizens must necessarily be informed by the moral grounding of their own faith. That we have an inherent conflict between the powers of the state and the powers of the church here in America, and indeed we are the only first world country that must endure such a conflict. And it is not new. Religious historian Mark A. Knoll wrote in his book, The Old Religion in the New World, he wrote at length about the role that religion held in governing our new nation. Its roots run deep into colonial history. New England and Virginia colonies were most adamant about mandating official religious standing. New England, with the exception of Rhode Island, closely tied church and state by enforcing the support of the church through public tax collection. Virginia restricted election to parliament, admission to university, service in the military, to only those who practiced the Anglican faith. Their laws were stricter than even those that were being enforced in England at the time. Knoll describes two forms of religious liberty. Positive liberty allows communities to structure themselves around religious practice as they chose without interference from England. Negative liberty allowed people to choose for themselves. Interesting choice of words. While New England, for the most part, and Virginia subscribed to the positive liberty, almost by default, the Middle Atlantic states, almost by default, practiced negative liberty. And it was in the middle colonies where negative liberty began to take hold, and the First Amendment was formed. Post-revolution matters became a little bit clearer. The First Amendment right of religious freedom was driven by the complexity of the populations in New York and Philadelphia, the two major trading ports of our new nation. Religious tolerance was accepted as a means to maintain social order. And although this right was applied at the federal level, common understanding at the time was that states could establish their own standards of religious tolerance. The late Reverend Forrest Church was a prominent Unitarian minister at All Souls Church in New York City, and he was a prolific author. In his book, In God We Trust, he describes the conflicts between church and state that arose during the first 5 presidencies of our nation. Of particular interest to us this morning is the enduring conflict between John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. Both were Unitarians, and each held widely differing views of the role of religion in governing. The fruit of deep New England roots, John Adams adamantly believed that religious practice must be expressed in the halls of Congress and in government offices. He insisted that at George Washington's first inauguration be followed by a worship service at Trinity Church, which was right across the street from Federal Hall in New York City. In the run-up to the election, Adams led a committee to decide what the proper titles for U.S. officials would be and what kinds of ceremonies would be appropriate. He leaned heavily towards those used by English royals. During his presidency, he regularly called for national days of prayer. He held his faith deeply, and even though as a Unitarian he would have been strongly oppressed in Virginia, he was firm in his belief that any government must be grounded in a morality gained from a Christian God. Now, Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, advocated a more libertarian point of view. He decried any attempt by government to control or require religious standing in order to engage in the daily life of a community. Jefferson was a deist, one who believed that a benevolent God started the clock of this universe ticking, and it is moving along quite nicely, thank you. His love for Jesus as a compassionate teacher is reflected in his own philosophy. He wrote to his friend Benjamin Rush, "I am a Christian in the only sense he wished anyone to be, sincerely attached to his doctrines, in preference to all others. In preference to all others, ascribing to himself every human excellence, and believing he never claimed any others." Jefferson's consideration of Jesus was counterbalanced by his complete disdain for church and priesthood. Reverend Church says his loathing was founded on 3 reasons. First, because they loathed him back. Second, his conclusion that the priest always the priest has always and everywhere been hostile to liberty. And third, that Calvinist theology offended his hope for God's justice and universal happiness. So these factors and his readings from the Enlightenment may well have rendered Thomas Jefferson the nation's preeminent libertarian of his day. Adams insisted that only a formal religious practice could maintain order in the new nation. Jefferson was convinced that churches and clergy were the main suppressors of personal liberty and should not have any role in government. When love sleeps, fear prevails. The fears that each had raised against the other mellowed over time, and they had become good friends by the time they both died on our nation's 50th birthday. Professor Knoll goes on to describe how the bonds between church and state loosened as the decades passed, although federal law was restrained from imposing religious context. An informal mandate of Protestant Trinitarian Christianity became widespread. As an example, the Bible study was compulsory in almost every public school across the nation. More specifically, the King James Version of the Bible. In 1886, Catholic parents in Edgerton, Wisconsin, brought suit saying that requiring Catholic students to hear the Bible in the King James Version violated their religious teachings. The school board argued that since the scripture was read without comment, each student could interpret for themselves. A local judge agreed with the school board, saying that the King James Version's very presence as a believed book has rendered the nation's having it a chosen race. Fortunately, the Wisconsin Supreme Court overruled the local court and removed the mandate for the King James Version of the Bible. They didn't remove the Bible, just the mandate to use the King James Version. And so as more decades pass, disconnect between church and state becomes wider. 20th century immigration increased populations of non-Christians, and religious tolerance had to expand to a breadth not even imagined in the early 19th century. Which leads us back to our conversation for today. Declarations that the U.S. was founded as a Christian nation are not totally untrue. If not embedded in law, Christianity was most certainly provided a moral and theological foundation for the majority that ruled. And Jefferson's libertarianism, while available to landed white men of a philosophical bent, was more useful to the frontier settler than to the townsman. In my life, we've come through so many cultural changes that the norm is seemingly amorphous and mercurial, at least to those who still hold on to the old framework. And large churches who are focused on culture wars and fanaticism make loud displays so as to capture the media spotlight, attract more colorful people and their money. And those who continue the work of bringing equity to marginalized populations do so quietly, every day, and their stories are regulated to the end of broadcast feel-good time. And perhaps that's how it should be. So, to pull all these strings together, If we strive to create a world where every individual has the opportunity to thrive and develop their own unique spirit, we must put an end to false identities that serve only to enforce a preconceived order. Civic order must be reconceived so that we can live and grow. We do not impose ourselves upon others around us. Economic resources cannot be hoarded by a few in order to impose upon their world their conception of order. Life, all life, must have equal value, allowing humans to live with the earth as one faction of a much larger community. These aspirations, I believe, align nicely with Unitarian Universalist principles, which gives us a place in this world today. I recently read that in order to effect cultural change, we must change the story. The stories that define us come from generations of communities fearing enslavement and death. Today, we can overcome these fears through advances in technology, communications, and understanding. We need to change the economic story from one of scarcity to one of abundance. We need to change the communication story from data hoarding to open information. We need to change the political story from competition to collaboration. We must tell ourselves stories of hope. Hope deployed across political boundaries, across economic classes, across all cultural differences. Love is the power that brings us together, that binds us together, and enables us to bring about this beloved community. Fear is the power that divides us and is a power that only love can overcome. It's important for our love to wake up and stay awake. Because, say it with me, when love sleeps, fear prevails. And so may it ever be.
One way that UUCW helps address human needs and advance social justice in our community is through our Split the Plate program. Each Unitarian Universalist and serve our community. Our Split the Plate program partner for February is Safe and Sound. Safe and Sound is a wonderful Milwaukee-based nonprofit located just north of the Sherman Park area. It's a community development organization whose mission is to unite residents, youth, law enforcement, and community resources to build safe and empowered neighborhoods. For example, in order to reduce drug, gang, prostitution, graffiti, and other civil and criminal issues that arise in the neighborhood, Safe and Sound cooperates with the Milwaukee Police and community-based organizations, and together they plan and coordinate community forums, landlord meetings, and block watch meetings. As another example, Safe and Sound coordinators take note of blight-related issues that include dumping, excessive trash, illegal parking, too tall grass, and encroaching bushes and trees. So they talk to residents and coach them on who to contact and how to abate those issues. To learn more about this very effective organization, visit their website at safesound.org. That's safesound.org. To help support Safe and Sound, go to the UUCW website's Donate tab and select Split the Plate from the menu, or text or mail your donation today using the information found here on the screen. Thank you for your generosity to Safe and Sound. We will now gratefully receive your offering.
And one more time, please rise in body and/or spirit to join us in singing hymn number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire.
Then have the day worship and are free.
Please join in unison for the closing words. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you.